All right, everyone. In the last 24 hours, Biden has mostly pivoted from his now likely doomed Voting Rights Act to other issues. The other day, he's given a speech about the infrastructure bill again for like the fifth or sixth time. He had these high hopes. We're going to have an OSHA mandate. We're going to save people's lives by doing absolutely nothing. That falls through. This is the other day. Did a Substack, by the way. I might as well link it in a pinned comment for those of you on YouTube. Definitely follow me on Substack. The growth there has been explosive, actually. Thinking people like the journalistic side almost more than the fucking videos. Is it because I have a face for radio? I kid. Anyway, here's the thing. With the Voting Rights Act, it's not really about voters' rights, and most unmedicated people understand this. It's also technically a distraction. I think the real goal, I don't think they expected the voting rights thing to go through, the John Lewis horse shit. It's basically the attempt to federalize the elections, rob the states of more sovereignty, fortify the elections in a number of competitive states that have defortified, namely Arizona, that's a big one on the list, New Hampshire, and Florida. Iowa and Indiana also. There are others with pending legislation, and if this doesn't pass, presumably after the midterms, when there's a red wave, which I think we can comfortably predict more or less, I would expect probably other states, maybe Pennsylvania, maybe Wisconsin, maybe Michigan, could be New York for all we know. We don't know what the differential will be. Biden is probably about to collapse again in the polls, possibly to sub-40 approval because of his various failures over the last week. But there's a problem. The Voting Rights Act is at the moment fundamentally dead because of two things. Then the cat's complaining and running around like a NASCAR driver again. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. What's the problem with this? Neither of them have made their decision not to put off the filibuster for this final vote. They can push it through reconciliation. Here's the process. I should probably explain that first. Through the reconciliation process, the Senate proposes the voting rights bill, so-called. It goes to the House. The House passes a different version. Now, they're all Democrats, so they can pass it easily. It then automatically bounces back to the Senate, back to the House, and it does this a third time. When it comes back, to actually have a vote and final debate on the bill only requires a simple majority. So the Democrats will vote for it, including probably Manchin and Sinema on this, and so will Kamala Harris. It will be an executive that passes that tie-breaking vote. Thus, it's already basically divisive in nature. But unless you also separately decide to offset the filibuster for the final vote, and Manchin and Sinema have said they won't do that, a few others, wasn't it Teller, I think, Feinstein has said she's reluctant too, which is really odd. I hate Feinstein. She had a Chinese spy as a limo driver for 20 years, and she's got more sense than the Geek Squad in the House. Without doing that, you still need 60 votes to pass it. You might be able to scrape together 2 Republican senators. Romney's an unprincipled jack-off. He'd probably vote in favor of it. And possibly Murkowski. Well, that falls fairly short of the 60-vote threshold. That gets you 52. And that's assuming that Manchin even stays with it. But the problem is that Manchin and Sinema are egotists. Manchin is doing his job. He's representing the wishes of West Virginians. It's a red state. He was a popular governor turned senator. That's the only reason that he won, because of that carryover technical incumbency. Otherwise, he would have lost. Joe Manchin is doing this for self-serving purposes. Don't be taken in by him. I saw it described the other day as he's the Ted Cruz of the Democratic Party. I agree completely. He's a useful idiot, but at least he's useful. And he's got more sense on certain issues than the average Dem, although if he ever became president, I have a feeling that he would swing away from those issues, because then his constituency is no longer West Virginians, therefore no more containment of his ideals. And then his constituency also involves like California and New York. Sinema somehow is even less principled. To be clear, Kyrsten Sinema is only in it for herself. And so what you need to do, if you live in Arizona, you need to write, email, call in, picket, do whatever you can to keep the pressure up on Sinema. Because it wouldn't be even odd for her to have an 11th hour revelation because of Additional disbursements from the DNC probably, or something like that, or from slush fund third-party PACs to change her mind. It wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for Manchin to flip as well. If that were to happen, you could end up with the filibuster delayed for that bill, which means it passes with Kamala Harris as a tiebreaker. While there is a 99% chance the bill goes nowhere, Schumer brings it up, reconciliation puts it forth, and in a totally partisan vote it gets knocked down, and the Democrats then get to take the W on this, technically speaking, at least with their own fans, because those that support this John Lewis voting bullshit, they can say, well, the Republicans stopped it. The Republicans hate democracy. It's red meat to the base. That's your consolation prize. Technically, they can't lose unless a bunch of Democrats refuse to vote for it. I would think they should probably get to work because they know that this is almost certain not to pass. But there's still that 1% chance to deal with. People from outside of those constituencies need to try to get people from Arizona and West Virginia to keep up the pressure too. Easier with West Virginia. West Virginia is like 60% Republican, so less of a chance Manchin flips. With Sinema, she's in a state that only leans slightly red. Arizona, honk honk, narrowly went for Biden in the last election. Okay, it leans red. It's like a 5-point differential. That's more like Georgia was a couple of elections ago, and we see where that can go. This isn't Florida that's becoming massively more Republican. This isn't Texas where the Hispanic voters are abandoning the DNC in droves. This is not parts of the Great Lakes region that were solidly blue 2 elections ago and now magically have become swing states. This is Arizona. And with Sinema not being a principled individual and rather a self-serving one, again, if she thinks that she'll benefit more from throwing actual democracy, or the republic rather, under the bus by voting in favor of this sort of thing, she will do that. She needs to know that her constituents don't support it, and the vast majority of Arizonans, they want voter ID. The vast majority of Americans across literally every age, race, gender, etc. demographic support voter ID laws. It is a supermajority of every single group in the United States. Even among black registered LGBT Democrats, a majority support voter ID. That's because people understand, hey, I should probably have a threshold similar to participate in the electoral process that I need in order to buy a fucking beer. I think that's important. A significant majority across most demographics also support, and this would certainly take place in a place like Arizona that is, again, leans red, support ID and witness for obtaining an absentee ballot and reasonable limitations on that. In the last election, because of the pig in a poke COVID mentality, we expanded universal mail-in access to all sorts of people, and that has become a problem. This has not been the way the U.S. has done business before. It's not the way that any significant civilized nation elsewhere in the developed world does their elections. Many of them don't have any mail-in voting, again, except for registered absentee ballots for military members that are deployed, for ambassadors, for people that are abroad and can't help it. That makes sense. But you should have to prove who you are before you obtain that ballot. Most people don't have a problem with the consolidation of polling places. The idea that a massively rural county with one fucking town as the county seat needs to have a voting location in a barn house for 3 people is simply bullshit. This is not the 1700s. People, they do have automobiles. Driving 10 minutes is not going to disenfranchise them. And if they honestly care that little, then they're not willing to take a 10, 15-minute drive to get to the polling place and expect it to be right next door, then fuck them. They shouldn't be voting because they're obviously low-info voters. No sympathy whatsoever. But sticks, say some leftoids. What about people that couch surf? What about people that are homeless? Again, they can still get a form of ID. Most of them already have one. If they've ever obtained one before, as most of them have, it's a simple matter of going to the DMV and renewing it. I'm sorry that these people are unfortunate and poor. Trust me, I've been in that boat and I was for most of my life. But I would think if you consider that great civic duty so important, you can probably make it work. It's possible, believe it or not. It is something. It's not that overburdensomely expensive. What the fuck are you talking about? Okay, 5 people in this county were prevented from voting because they were extremely poor, couldn't get their ID. That number is probably lower than the number of people's ballots who will be harvested after they're dead if you have a universal mail-in system and you don't have a methodology to check whether it's the person that's eligible to vote. Because you've incentivized that. Let's say that it's only a few thousand votes scattered across the whole state that end up being fraudulent. It would still be higher than the number of people who would be otherwise eligible to vote, want to vote, and then end up not being able to because they were too stupid to renew their ID. We're just saying, show your driver's license, show your state ID, show something that shows that you are the person whose ballot you're requesting. You know what I do in Vermont when I go vote? I give them my name. They give me my ballot. And while this is simple and easy and, it's in a community like the one I live in, the people there know who you are, and so that's sort of a check and balance system there. But many communities aren't like that, certainly not in any particularly developed area. The area I live in is semi-rural. It's a big problem if you have people there. They give a name because, the laundry list of names in that precinct is going to be a no-brainer. They don't have to show ID. They just give the name, they get the ballot. They could be a felon. They could be a non-citizen. They could be under 18. They kind of look like they're 19, though, so I'm just assuming. There's no check system. They can't even ask them for ID. So the Voting Rights Act is a big problem. It's an attempt to refortify the elections and override the 10th Amendment. It's illegal, too. It's unconstitutional. The problem is that they're trying to pass it at such a time that unless it's fast-tracked, the Supreme Court probably wouldn't get to it till after the midterms. And so you need to contact Manchin and Sinema, probably Feinstein, too, out in California. Keep in mind, she's been reluctant to offset the filibuster, too, and Tester and a few of these others. Certainly, if you're in Utah with Mitt Romney, it would be a good idea to contact him, too. And Murkowski, she's in Alaska, I think. And these are red states, but they're not doing the will of their constituency any more than Liz Cheney is. So keep up the pressure and stop it. That's about all. Peace out.